So, so thank you, David. Thank you again for being back with us, after a long absence. Yeah. And so today we're going to be touching the most important subject, I guess, that there is when it comes to heavy metals toxicity, right? So I'll just let you. Do you have a presentation? Do you need to, or
Oh, I could. I have many presentations.
I imagine. Let me see. There's some people who want to come in. Let's see now.
Let me see if I
Oh,
have anything that'll be exciting for us today. Um, one of the things that we have just recently released on Substack was a cry to stop Cassiopeia. They took orphans in Portugal and put mercury fillings in their teeth and said, "See, no problem." And that was a lie. They knew it was a lie when they wrote it, and that is um, still the basis that the FDA allows 50 million new mercury fillings a year to go into people's teeth. A nice new study just came out today by the David Geyer showing that the symptoms of MS get worse the more mercury fillings you have in your teeth. So that doesn't prove that it's causing it, but it would certainly indicate that you might want to not have mercury fillings in your
yeah,
teeth.
it's not helping you at all in your condition.
No, I don't believe it's going to. So anyway, that's the sad news is that we've got nothing but pushback from the people that are doing the evil deeds, and I think that's kind of story of forever. Is that the evil always pushes back? They call the voice of reason bad names. They use politics and the regulatory agencies. If there was a really good RICO attorney, that it's really clear that the interaction between the Food and Drug Administration and the American Dental Association boils down to RICO, organized crime and racketeering. And that the definition of that is when one agency conspires with another
With
agency
another agency
to
to,
screw us, and that we're all getting screwed by mercury fillings in our teeth. Everybody in the world agrees except the United States, Brazil, New Zealand, Australia, Canada. You notice how they all speak English? So if the liars are lying to you in English, then you can kind of convince the other English speakers because you've got your doctor label and your PhD and all that stuff. Um, so I'm going to start with the end because I want everybody here.
Hij zegt ook dat het allemaal conspiracy is, al dat medische
let's
gedoe.
see who's there.
Somebody, it's not a conspiracy, it's a program. I heard somebody was complaining about a conspiracy. A conspiracy is what they use to say, oh, it's not real. But what if it's proven to be real? And what does that make it? It makes it a policy, not a conspiracy. I used to call it not a conspiracy, but stupidity.
There you go. I think I muted you by mistake. I'm sorry. I'm trying to mute here because I am using my laptop here. Yes. You need to unmute. Yeah. You need to unmute.
Okay. Well,
sorry about that.
a little technical glitch. Maybe it's a conspiracy. God. So let me share my screen and I'll go through the Cassiopeia.
Yeah. You need to
There's a little button down on the bottom right that says share.
Tabitha,
David, share my screen.
yes. Give the rights to David to share. Tabi, yeah, she's working on it.
With the Tabitha.
Yeah, some
We
technical.
have a problem. That was kind of the understatement here, wasn't
It's a conspiracy, us against us.
it? That's it. That's it. Or is it just old people having trouble with technology? I think the latter. It's not the only thing I have trouble with. So,
Mary, ¿me ayudas aquí, por favor? Yeah, but can you do that for me, please? Because yo no sé manejar esto sin mal. Me enredo todo. Estoy aquí la cosa, ¿eh? So, okay, come. A ver, ven. Sí, ya. Ahora sí, permitir. Ya, okay, ya. Okay. So now
all
you're
right.
there. Oh, sorry about that.
Back with the little glitch there, and
Yeah, there you go.
so am I can't. I don't see any sharing going on, so I think we'll say screw it and just go forward.
You cannot share your screen?
Well, I clicked the share and it says share settings and remove from toolbar. I click the share settings and nothing happens.
Oh, okay.
So it's a more technology, different day.
Yeah.
So
Okay, no, you wanna send it to me and I'll try and show it here, or it's too complicated like that?
I think what we do is just go on because
Okay, let's do
this
that.
is getting very boring.
Yeah, let's do that.
So let me explain how we managed to have a 207-year argument. Is it in 1819, two young men from France had learned from an alchemist that if you mixed mercury with the filings off a coin, it turned hard after a little bit. And so they decided to call that Royal Mineral Secundum because everybody knew that mercury was a poison. They didn't want to tell them they're putting mercury in their teeth. And so they got on their horse and they rode around the United States advertising that, for $1, you could get a tooth fixed. Well, they didn't know anything about fixing teeth. And so what they did is that if you had a big cavity in a tooth, they would take some of that dollar that you were going to give them and file the edges off the coin. You can still find those coins today with a little bit of filing off the edges. And they'd mix that filing with the mercury and stuff it in their tooth and say, tooth is all fixed, goodbye. And then they'd get on their horse and go to another town because very shortly those people would come back and try to kill them because, they didn't take the decay out. They didn't do anything to fix the tooth. And that the filling they made suddenly got bigger and broke the tooth. It's still happening today. Mercury fillings break teeth. The tooth is weakened 75% by putting a mercury filling in it. If you do the modern dentistry where you adhese a material or ceramic to the tooth, you can actually glue the tooth together with the modern materials and make it stronger than it was to start with. So why do we keep getting this rhetoric that it's the best way to fix teeth? Is because it's really cheap because, you can use the patient's coin out of their pocket, get a little bit of mercury out of the thermometer, and all of a sudden you made $1. So anyway, it's always been crooked. And in 1859, 40 years later, the Dental Society had kicked so many people out of the American Society of Dental Surgeons that the people that got kicked out were the ones using mercury. So they started their own organization, and its name is the American Dental Association today. And it has never, ever said anything bad about mercury fillings. It doesn't say anything bad about mercury fillings because their members use mercury fillings. The ADA owns insurance companies that insist on using mercury fillings. The ADA had the patent on a form of mercury filling for a long time. They have a seal of approval that they make money off of from the mercury filling. It says they own no duty of care to the public. The seal is for revenue, packaging, and purity. And it's not for safety. They said that's dependent upon the Food and Drug Administration. And then they got the NIH, National Institute of Health, to give them $11 million. I wish the NIH would give me $11 million. Anyway, they give them $11 million, and they took an orphanage in Portugal. And for the people listening, after Auschwitz and the Nuremberg trials, that it was determined that experimenting on disenfranchised humans was unethical. So if you're a prisoner in a prison, if you're an orphan in an orphanage, that you are not supposed to be subject to a clinical trial. And if you are subject to a clinical trial, it is supposed to be for your benefit. All clinical trials, in fact, are limited to benefit of the patient, not the pharmaceutical industry, not the dental trade association, not the manufacturers of dental amalgam. It's supposed to benefit the person receiving the care. And in the case of Casapia, 100% of the children were injured. Not 2, not 5, not all, this or that, or 1, or maybe this or that. 100%. The minute they started putting mercury fillings in, the kids started peeing out more mercury. And they also started to pee out more albumin. Your body doesn't pee out albumin. Albumin is an essential protein in your blood. It carries hormones. It carries OSR. It carries fat-soluble hormones to various organs throughout the body. It is an essential protein in your blood, and all of a sudden it was coming out the urine. Well, that's because mercury poked holes in the proximal tubule of the kidney. That is an injury. It's the beginning of chronic kidney failure. There are 11% of the population in the United States are supposed to suffer from chronic kidney failure. Maybe it's because they're about half the population have mercury fillings in their teeth. Do you think?
Maybe.
So anyway, Casapia went from 2000 till 2005. And the very first data showed that they were injuring the children. And so to cover up, they started putting mercury fillings in the control. Listen up. These were not clean controls. They were children that had mercury fillings in their teeth. In Kansas, where I'm from, we call that cheating. In the United States, when you get money from the National Institute of Health and you cheat, it's called fraud. So not only is it an unethical experiment, it's one that committed fraud the minute the data started coming in. And they published their results. You could say, oh, the scientists, oh, you're just being fussy. That they published the study in 2 journals, both of them trade journals. So trade journals have advertising. And they're not independent sources of information any more than your newspaper is.
Mm-hmm.
You see a big ad in the newspaper, come and get Jose to build a wall in your house. And then here's a nice article about how nice walls Jose builds, that they tit for tat. This is no different than anything else. So trade association journals have about zero respect in the scientific community because of that conflict of interest. If they accept advertising, they're going to do what the advertiser wants them to do and say and publish articles about how good the advertiser is. And so anyway, they published these 2 articles saying mercury fillings were perfectly safe and hid the data that it took until 2012, 7 years later, under thanks to Richard Nixon, we have a thing called open records request. And that, so what they did is they took the records that were requested and dumped them into one large file. Well, that's the same thing attorneys do when they don't want you to find the bill of lading saying, you know, buy this plutonium and send it off there. So anyway, they lots of labor on the part of Anita Tabao separated the emails, and they knew the children were being abused. Actually, one of the whistleblowers was a boy that received mercury fillings, and he told the investigators. So they knew the children were being abused. They didn't stop the experiment. They didn't address the abuse. They just decided to continue the experiment and then cover it up. And that the damage to the kidney was not visible in the original publication because they took all the kids and put them together. And they said, Group A wasn't any different than Group B. Well, it was different than Group B, but it wasn't a lot different. And so when the data came out, David Geyer and his dad, Mark, took the data and said, if they have one filling, they go here. If they got two fillings, they go here. If they got three fillings, they go here. And they put them out so that they lined up how many fillings they got. And what they were able to show is that the more fillings they got, the more damage they had to their kidney. And that's, you know, they say statistics don't lie, but statisticians do. And so they were busy lying through their teeth so that they could continue to use a 200-year-old material that already had been shown to cause harm. This was no reason whatsoever to do this experiment. That the IAOMT, an organization I love and have been a member of since it was formed in 1985 at their first meeting I attended, and that was the meeting where we heard from Murray Vimy, one of our founders, a serial measurement on mercury coming off the filling in the breath of people that had mercury fillings. And it was the third time that this had been shown. So it wasn't the first time, it was the third time. The first time was Alfred Stock in 1926. The ADA was able to refute that by putting a group of dentists together and says, well, that guy's a fool. So whenever you hear somebody being called a fool, look and see what they found. Because that's all they had. All they could do was to denigrate one of the premier scientists in Germany in 1926. And so Dr. Stock measured mercury in his own breath. And that was...
Does that mean, David, sorry, so that means that if somebody has a lot of fillings with amalgams, the person next to him is also breathing that mercury. That is the case.
Well, yes, but only a little tiny bit. Now, if you're in a helmet like a spacesuit, where your breath comes back at you, that the original astronauts ruined their spacesuits because their breath was so full of mercury. The Navy, Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, Public Health Service, all used mercury fillings. And so the astronauts ruined $1 million helmets by breathing. And so they decided that maybe the astronauts didn't need mercury fillings. So, but how about if you were in a space capsule? Yeah, you know, there's that, but dilution is probably going to lower the amount of mercury that your neighbor is going to inhale from you. So unless you're giving them a big kiss and inhaling, you're probably not exposed to that much mercury. But you know, what happens to people is that the old toxicology was that you can be exposed to heavy metals, any metal you want, as much as you like, for as long as you like, and as long as it doesn't kill you, you're okay. But that incorrect theory of toxicology was profoundly refuted by Herbert Needleman in 1972. So that toxicology lasted more than 150 years until Herbert Needleman measured lead in the drinking water of Wichita, Kansas. And Wichita, being Kansas, is flat as a pancake. So here's this big city that has one water tower. Why? It's got no uphill, no downhill. It's just flat. And so they said it had two pipes. One went north and one went south. And they said, okay, let's treat one pipe and get the lead down to 20 parts per billion. And the other lead was up at 50, which is legal at the time. And then they tracked the kids through high school. And, 7 years later, they said, say, there seems to be a large difference in IQ of the kids that were raised on the low lead water versus the high lead water. And oh, you should have heard what an idiot Needleman was. Oh, he's a bad scientist. He's a crook. He's a thief. He's a terrible person. And then, when the dust settled, it was Dr. Needleman was right. And so whenever you hear somebody being called bad names, look and see what they found. Needleman found that lead was bad. Well, why would that get anybody excited? Well, it made the International Lead Association excited because they're selling tons of lead to gasoline companies to make tetraethyl lead gas. And so it was an economic choice on their part to try to get rid of Herbert Needleman. Well, they weren't successful. But they're still using the technology that existed before Needleman on mercury, because they're still saying if it doesn't kill you, mercury's fine. That is totally untrue. And here's the deal. Everybody on this planet is different. That's how they can run down criminals with the DNA, because we have a different record in our history. You got a grandma, I got a grandma, and they're not the same people. And that so with that knowledge, there are multiple variations in the genetics that make some people much more susceptible to mercury than others. We know some of the names. It's APOE4. They get Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, MS. CPOX4, they get brain damage and from mercury fillings. Even one mercury filling damaged all the boys in Casapia if they were CPOX4. In scientific experiments, you're happy if you see a trend of 5 or 10% this way or 5 or 10%. This is 100%. Every single child was damaged, and they covered it up. They didn't publish that for another 7 years. And they didn't publish it at all until they lost control of the data. It's a government program, and they hid the data until the court said, nah, you can't hide secret. You don't have secret data. You're not publishing anything. You're not continuing to do research on these children. Matter of fact, they left. They left after 5 years. Those kids still have mercury fillings in their teeth. Those kids are still being harmed based on the evidence that they collected in 2000. So that's why my new campaign, which was just published on Substack for the IOMT this last day before yesterday, is called Stop Casapia. Is that children at Casapia were abused by pedophiles in Lisbon. The managers of the orphanage sold their little bodies to the pedophiles. For years, it was blown, whistle blow. They stopped, supposedly.
Oh.
But we're still abusing them. We left the mercury fillings in there. We don't talk to them anymore. We turned them loose on society and said, say, you're on your own. And what's interesting is they always intended to do that. And if any lawyers listening, that if you look at the informed consent in English, the one that was approved by the Institutional Review Board, and it was determined later to be not accurate and therefore unethical, they did not tell those children they were going to be exposed to mercury. They're working in an orphanage, so where's the adult going to help that child? Informed consent for 170 children were signed by one person. Gosh, I don't think that's really the way we're supposed to be doing this, right? So the orphanage participated in the abuse of the children, both with mercury and with sexual deviance. And that those children are walking around today, they're 33, 34 years old with mercury fillings in their teeth, and they've still got the same injuries they had back in 2000 when they started getting those fillings. And so I'm calling for that to stop. The Food and Drug Administration said on 9/24/2020 that removal of dental amalgam is dangerous because it exposes you to mercury. They haven't explained how putting mercury fillings in, which exposes you to the same or higher levels of mercury that are continuous throughout the life of the filling, is also okay because they have allowed that to occur. And then 50 million new ones last year alone. So who gets these fillings? All the poor people.
Yes.
Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Public Health Service, anybody that's dependent upon the government for mercury fillings, including the Native Americans. However,
But the same thing, David, the same thing is here in Brazil, in the sense that the people who are dependent on the national system of the health system, right? They have the choice. They could get, but they don't know. They don't give them the choice. They just use them, you know. So they're being
they don't use them, they abuse them.
they abuse them. Exactly.
Yeah, they abuse them. And so the Native Americans in the United States have told the Public Health Service, the military branch of the Army, Navy, Air Force, the healthcare branch of the Army, Navy, Air Force. It's called the Public Health Service. People don't realize that's a branch of the military. And they have been always in charge of Indian healthcare. And so that the worst healthcare outcome in the United States is the Native Americans. They got like 30% with diabetes or pre-diabetics, rampant alcoholism, and health problems galore. Well, gee, what's alcoholism got to do with mercury? And I got to go to a rat experiment because it's hard to do these experiments on humans. But Maori had the inclination, the theory that alcohol had something to do with chronic mercurialism. And so he took rats, put them in a cage, and he gave them two choices. Down at the end of the cage, you could have a choice of water, or you could have a choice of alcohol. And so after a little while, when he got a pretty good idea that the rats only drank water, that none of the rats went down and drank alcohol. Well, look at that. The rats like water. And then he injected them with mercury chloride. And that guess what? The rats scampered down the little cage over the water dish, went right by the water dish, and drank gobs of alcohol. Well, that didn't save the little rat's life because Maori cut him up to look and see what was the deal. And so the rats that only had water and mercury had a lot of mercury in their brain. And the rats that had alcohol had 90% less mercury in their brain. So when you wonder why painters, dentists, and people with mercury fillings in their teeth stop at the bar and knock down a half a dozen shots every day, they're trying to protect their brain from the time-release mercury fillings in their teeth, is my theory. And anyway, that's so you go to the reservation, and here are a whole group of people who've never been exposed to toxins in their entire history, all of a sudden implanted with time-release mercury. And that the reason that's important is that the subsets of the population that are extremely sensitive to mercury are the ones that come from areas that are pristine and clean for centuries before. Right. North American, not North American, but North Europeans, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, England, have been dirty for 500 years. I saw a picture of Bath, England from back in the 1800s, and it was black. And then if you go to Bath today, it's white. Well, what happened was about 1920, they banned the burning of coal. So there was so much coal dust in the air that all the beautiful marble buildings in Bath, England had turned black after hundreds of years of burning. So does that cause any problem? Of course it does.
Imagine.
It killed all the babies that were sensitive to coal dust. So there was a culling of people that were sensitive to bad stuff coming out of coal, which includes mercury, particulate matter, And so that never happened in the United States. We never had a coal burning fire plant until after the white man got here. They burned wood. And if they burned anything at all. So vulnerable subsets are, by definition, people who have a genetic predisposition to be injured by mercury. And interestingly enough, that's all the males. Is that just having testosterone makes you more sensitive to mercury. And that's estrogen is protective. So maybe that's why the ladies are so successful today, because that we're poisoning the boys and the ladies can resist it more than the boys. Even the autistic girls have high testosterone levels. And so, yes, I am saying autism is linked to neurological impairment caused by exposing the mother to mercury. And here's the deal, is that if you analyze the baby's brain, and the only good study I know of this entire thing was one that was happenstance. It happened in Los Angeles. A woman that was 30 years old was 6 months pregnant, and she hit a bridge abutment, and both she and her fetus died. The coroner in Los Angeles analyzed at that time brain level mercury with the most sophisticated way known to mankind. It's called neutron activation analysis, where you take a piece of brain, bombard it with a radiation, and that it makes all the metals in the brain radioactive. And you can measure down to picograms, not milligrams, not kilograms, picograms, a millionth of a nanogram, or it's tiny amounts.
Yeah.
And what they found was the mother's brain mercury was a little bit higher than the fetus, but the fetus at 6 months was 60% of the mother. It's a generational poison. It goes from mother to child. And so they say, well, I've never had a mercury filling, and you're still nuts. Bipolar disorder, depression, all kinds of mental illness. They used to talk as mad as a hatter. The hatters got mercury poison because they were using mercury chloride to felt hats, and they were nuts or crazy as a painter. The painters had both lead and mercury exposure.
Lead and mercury.
Everybody talks about these, but they don't put two and two together. There's a book by Wadeen, a VA doctor, called Poison in the Pot. And he talks about the king's gout, where the king's toe would blow up and it would hurt like crazy. And that they were, it only happened one time a year. And that was the year that when they drank cider. And that the cider was fermented apples in a cask. And guess how they glued the cask together? With lead. Mm-hmm. And so they were giving the king lead cider, and that would blow his toe up. Ooh, wow. So anyway, stupidity reigns. And
absolutely. David, why don't we now get a little bit more into the effects of, like, there are so many, and we know that the mercury is like the baddest, if I may use a bad English there, baddest of the baddest of the heavy metals. But we'd like to know, like, so how does it affect brain? How does it affect your microbiota? And what is the interaction with other heavy metals, for example? What about oxidative stress and so on? So the effects in the body, can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I wrote an article not too long ago that starts off with mercury, terrible poison. And that, interestingly enough, there are over 250 symptoms of mercury intoxication. And so how do you get so many symptoms? I had one dad that says, oh, there can't be that many symptoms. And the reason there are that many symptoms is because mercury screws with every single system in the human body. It damages the heart, the brain, the kidney, the liver, the immune system, the membranes. It opens up membranes. It creates porous membranes. If you're swallowing mercury going through your intestines, it changes the flora. in the intestine from a normal flora to an antibiotic resistant one. That was a study that the International Academy of Oral Medicine Toxicology paid for and helped participate in. We took monkeys from the wilds of Borneo that had never even been to a doctor, had never received an antibiotic in their life. All they ever ate was fruit out of the trees of Borneo until they got captured and put into a scientific experiment at the University of Calgary, where the friendly dentist, Murray Vimy, put mercury fillings. And, some people say, oh, he didn't do it right. Okay, so Murray got an A in dental school. He was the cum laude. He was the best dentist in the entire class. So if he did it wrong, who is doing it right? So anyway, he did it right. And they put mercury fillings in the monkeys. And that within 6 weeks, the entire flora of the monkey gut had changed from the normal wild-caught monkey, wild species of bacteria to antibiotic-resistant organisms that also resisted mercury. So that was 1989, I think it was, when we did that. So what's that, 40 years ago, 30 years ago? It's just silly that they're still arguing about this. You want to change the gut flora. What happens when you do that? You get mold, you get diarrhea, you get chronic bowel syndromes, you get indigestible food going through, you get all kinds of stuff wrong. And that's just one of its actions. How about porous membranes? So your body is a bunch of sacs. There's a sac around your brain, there's a sac around your heart, there's a sac around your blood vessels, there's a sac around your food, because you put something in this hole here and it comes out the other. Well, what gets into your body is separated by a membrane. And the intestinal lining is selective in what it lets in. It doesn't let everything you eat in. You don't have rutabagas going around in your bloodstream. You have individual molecules that your body needs for nutrition. Well, if you poke holes in that membrane, all of a sudden you get corn or rutabaga or artichoke, whole molecules that your body can form immune reactions to and give you a headache, because that's the most common thing people report when they got leaky gut is either diarrhea or a headache. And that's because strange and unusual molecules are getting where they're not supposed to be. So that's one of the tricks that mercury has. Another one is it alters protein. And so people have what are called autoimmune reactions. And this is a cop-out on the part of medicine. But if you go to graduate school and you say, I'd like to study autoimmune disease, the professor will say, well, yes, that sounds like a good thing. There's a lot of people, there's about 14% of the population suffer from some sort of autoimmune disease. And that would be a good thing to study. And that the graduate student says, well, professor, how do I get an animal that has an autoimmune disease? And they said, oh, that's easy. Just expose them to mercury. Well, why don't we think that might be causing autoimmune? We keep looking over here and say, oh, it's an idiopathic disease. Oh, it's an idiopathic disease. You know what that means? Idiots can't figure out the pathology. If you can cause it with one thing, you better look at that thing as possibly being the cause of everything. Boyd Haley did research on Alzheimer's for 30 years. And when he spoke in 1989 at the IAOMT, he pointed out that, yes, mercury seems to be involved in all the damage of the brain of Alzheimer's disease, but he was unable to cause it. And Murray Vimy, the sheep dentist, immediately chimed in and said, what form of mercury did you use? And he said, I used mercury chloride because it's a liquid and I could inject it in a rat. And Murray said, it's got a charge on it. It won't go across the blood-brain barrier. So you're not exposing the brain. And if that's what you're looking at, you're not going to find it. And he said, I don't have an animal hospital where I can expose them to mercury vapor. And Murray said, how many animals do you need? And that became Pendergrass. In 1997, 7 years later, 8 years later, they published the results of exposing animals to mercury vapor, and that all the animals had the same aberrancies, changes in their metabolism, changes in the neurons, changes in the inside of the neuron as Alzheimer's disease. So is that causal? Boyd will say it's causal. He said there may be something else that causes it too, but mercury sure did cause it better than any other of the agents. He tried 18 different metals, and none of them caused any of the aberrancies except mercury. So don't we know what causes Alzheimer's? Yeah, stupidity. That's what it is. Let's put a time-release mercury fillings in people's teeth and see if it causes their brain to shrivel. The Alzheimer brain is 1/3 the size of a normal brain by the time it's diagnosed. The body's constantly trying to straighten it out, constantly trying to get along. But as long as that mercury's in there, it's like a bullet inside the cranium. When the mafia kills somebody, they shoot him in the head with a 22 caliber pistol, a little teeny bullet, because they know it won't go out the other side. They want it to go around and around and around and around, and that's what mercury does. Once it gets in the brain, it goes around and around and around and around. And that's why you get the majority of symptoms of mercury intoxication that people notice are brain symptoms, that they have fatigue, bad eyesight, glasses, and a whole host of brain symptoms, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, forgetfulness, unable to.
So how does it act exactly in the neurons? If we go, let's go inside there. And questions from the public we'll do at the end, a Q&A, Mauro. Okay.
Hold that question and write it down because I'll forget it. So so William, you want to know how it works? And it worked by a number of different mechanisms. But the principal mechanism that we think is really driving the brain damage is best example was the accidental death of Dartmouth toxicologist Karen Wetterhahn. Karen was a famous toxicologist, very skilled in her profession, a full professor at Dartmouth. And she had 2 jars of dimethyl mercury, one with about a quarter and the other with about a third. And she said, I don't need 2 jars of dimethyl mercury. I should have 1 jar and I could dispose of this. And that way I only have 1 terribly hazardous form of mercury in my laboratory, which she used. She had used it. It was a standard that she used to calibrate the equipment. And in the process of combining the little jar with the little bit bigger jar, she got 2 drops of dimethyl mercury on a gloved finger. And she realized that was probably a bad idea and ripped the glove off, washed her finger. And in 3 months, she started slurring her speech. And that she told that she was at a toxicology meeting in Japan, and she told them, I think I got too much mercury. And they put her in the hospital and treated her with all of the available chelators. And she died. She died at 9 months. But Karen, being a good scientist, left her body to science. And thank you, Dr. Wetterhahn, for showing us what killed you. Her neurons in her brain died from what's called oxidative stress. And so mercury doesn't trade electrons, so it can't cause oxidation. So how did her brain die of oxidative stress? And that's very simple. Mercury went into her brain from that glove finger into the bloodstream. Dimethyl mercury will poke a hole in the membrane, just like all forms of mercury do that, and went into the brain, into the cell, into the mitochondria, where the body stores iron in order to make energy. That's how your body makes energy. It uses iron to trade an electron. Same way it carries oxygen. The iron is on the hemoglobin molecule, so it'll carry oxygen. It has to trade an electron to do that. So that's a redox metal. And what happened was mercury got in there, released so much of the iron that the iron turned the mitochondria into free radical producers. And it basically cooked her brain, that the free radicals are oxidative stress, and it will kill you. Everybody in this podcast are going to die of oxidative stress. If I put a rope around your neck and tighten it up to the point where you can no longer breathe, the cells in your body will die from oxidative stress. That's why people die, oxidative stress. It's not a disease, it's a condition. But it's a condition that mercury was able to cause in Karen Wetterhahn, despite the use of 75-year-old chelators. The old chelators do not chelate. Chelate means claw, so you need to form an attachment. The old chelators attract, so they're more or less binders. They basically attract stuff, and because they're water soluble, they attract them and take them to the kidney, which is exactly where you don't want to take them because the kidney is very sensitive to mercury. But that's stuff that was invented in 1950 by Trachtenberg, and then there's a knockoff, DMSA. A few years later, they have exactly the same flaw, that the attractor is an amino acid called cysteine. Cysteine is a one-carbon amino acid, and it's too short. So it's like if you had a hand like this and you're trying to catch a basketball. Well, that hand isn't big enough to catch a basketball. So none of the chelators can actually get a hold of, capture, they'll attract because there's sulfur. But then, there's sulfur in your protein. That's why it causes autoimmune disease. It uncurls the protein. That's why it causes holes in the blood-brain barrier, because it's attracted to the sulfur that's in the membranes. So, this is really easy, actually. We don't need heavy metals in our body. We don't need them at all. And so my friend Boyd Haley, after he retired from being professor of chemistry, his step forward was he basically had the librarian at the University of Kentucky pull and make copies of and hand it to him every scientific paper that has been published in the previous decade that used the word mercury anywhere in it, in the title, in the subject, in the abstract. Mm-hmm. And so he had a stack that was about 3 feet tall. And he sat down in his easy chair and started reading. And he has the kind of brain that we could all wish we had, because he actually understood everything was in those papers. And he read and read and read until he actually found a molecule. He said, that'll work. And it was a molecule that had more or less been abandoned because they couldn't figure out how to make it. And he said, well, I can make that, because he's a PhD chemist and he has a detailed knowledge of synthesis. And so he looked at it and he said, well, that looks to me like it's 2 natural products. There's a dicarboxyl ring, which I can find over here in bitter cherries. And here are the arms that are made out of cysteine, cysteine is a 2-carbon amino acid that ends in sulfur. So I can get some of this and some of that. And through a complex process that takes almost 24 hours, I can get the carbon ring to have 2 arms. And that's exactly what he did. He made a 2-armed molecular robot that just dangles those beautiful sulfurs. And so when it dangles those beautiful sulfurs anywhere near mercury, arsenic, lead, cadmium, uranium, thorium, barium, gadolinium, those molecules will let loose of whatever they're holding on to, because they have to distort it. And that's energy. It just makes an energy choice. And so instead of distorting your hemoglobin, which is not designed to hold mercury, it's designed to hold iron. And so the design is wrong to hold mercury, but mercury's a bully, so it gets a hold of it. But when the old Boyd Haley molecule floats by, the mercury says, say, there's a nice connection. I'll let go of this one and get that one. And now I have an energy-free bond. Once it's bound, it's impossible to make it let go. It takes 1,800 degrees, the same temperature as it takes to smelt a cinnabar, which is the ore that mercury comes from, to get the mercury loose from the sulfur. You can break the ring at about 450 degrees, but those hands still stay stuck on the mercury until you get it up to the smelting temperature. Well, you're not going to be up to 1,800 degrees until they cremate you. And so that might be an argument for putting mercury poisoned citizens in the ground and let them decay, because it will never let loose in the environment again. under normal circumstances. Until you apply heat, energy, it's not going to let go. And it does that with all those metals. Not just one, not just two. It is the universal antidote to heavy metal poisoning. Boyd invented that synthesis, started making it, and because it was a combination of two natural ingredients, sold it as a supplement. And he called it OSR, for oxidative stress relief. Why oxidative stress? Because it likes the OH minus, which is, like a half a piece of water. Water is H2O, 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. What if you take 1 hydrogen off? Well, now you got something that's going to burn you. And that's what free radicals are. It's a broken piece of water. And that this molecule likes broken water more than it likes the heavy metals. So when you first take it, if you don't take enough, it won't go after any metals. It goes after the OH minus, and it takes them 3 at a time in one hand. And the other hand is unchanged. Boyd can explain exactly why it does that. And, but
I'm sure he could.
Yeah. Everybody feels better when they take it, because all of a sudden the oxidative stress is getting pulled out of their body. So it's a universal supplement that makes people feel better. Now, we just can't have that on the market. And so they made stuff up about Boyd so they could ban it. And the Rupert Murdoch's Chicago Tribune sent a reporter to talk to Dr. Haley, because the autistic community was really big on OSR, because it seemed to make the boys a lot better, girls too, but most of the autistic children are boys. And I told you why. Testosterone makes mercury more toxic.
Right.
You got a 10-to-1 ratio of boys to girl. But anyway, they were very happy about the fact that all of a sudden their children could speak in full sentences, and bowel control and eye contact and that sort of stuff. And the people causing the problem were angry because it was going to cut down on their revenue stream. So they sent Rupert Murdoch to interview Boyd Haley. And she said, well, Dr. Haley, why did you invent this molecule? And he said, I didn't invent this molecule. I found it. And then what I did invent was a process where we can make large volumes extremely pure. And so she went back and wrote in the Chicago Tribune that Boyd Haley wants to kill all the autistic children, because he said he wants to make autism go away. Her solution is, I guess, with an Uzi or something. His solution was to take the mercury out of their brain.
Right. So David, so now that you have touched upon the subject, and for those of you who are raising your hands and have questions, please keep them. We're going to try and answer all of them at the end of the interview. So David, what could be happening then? What happens with this boy or girl? What happens when this marvelous molecule goes into the body? What changes? What is it said that happens there at cellular level that makes such a difference? Because it's amazing what you are telling us right there.
Well, first and foremost, it quenches oxidative stress. Mm-hmm. And that being nuts is oxidative stress, or being impaired is oxidative stress. Being depressed is oxidative stress. Being injured in your brain is oxidative stress. Even your football injuries, your TBI, that's iron causing oxidative stress of the brain. F-18 pilots that are cranking a 9G turn, that makes blood leak out of their brain, and they end up impaired in later life. So oxidative stress is the bad actor. What's causing the oxidative stress is any number of things, but in this case, it's a heavy metal that has released iron inside the mitochondria of the brain. So, but the primary effect, you look recently, there was an announcement that there's several studies now showing that Tylenol was linked to adverse outcome in the fetus. And you say, well, gosh, how could that be? Well, Tylenol makes oxidative stress. Gee, there seems to be a theme here. Oxidative stress seems to be caused by Tylenol. There's a number of studies, lots of them. 52 out of 55 studies show that exposure to fluoride caused lower IQ in the children. and that you go look at the brain of an animal exposed to fluoride, it's under oxidative stress. So anything that causes oxidative stress, whether it's Tylenol or fluoride or mercury, is going to damage the brain. So that the bottom line is you don't want to be exposed to those things. What if you had been? What if you had got, your mother had mercury fillings? What if you had mercury fillings? What if you eat fish? What if you have an injury that you think is caused by mercury? How are you going to stop that? Well, that's why Boyd invented the molecule, because it's a ghost. It doesn't do anything to you. It doesn't care about you. It doesn't like anything about you. You don't have heavy metals in your brain. You don't have heavy metals in your blood. You don't have heavy metals in your system, unless, of course, you've been implanted or eaten the crappy food that we have, that have or breathed the crappy air that we have, and then you have heavy metal in your blood and your brain. And the half-life, the time it takes for half of it to get out of your brain is 27 years. So if you got, they did a study on babies that were born in the United States. This is the study done by the Center for Disease Control, and Tresandi published, and it's almost 20 years old now. I'd like to know what it is today, that 1 out of 5 boys, babies, not boys, babies are born with mercury, enough mercury in the umbilical cord. You know what you know about the umbilical cord? That is the lifeline to the baby. And so when they're born, they don't need the umbilical cord anymore. And so they analyzed the blood in the umbilical cord, and there were above 5 micrograms per deciliter mercury. That is the level that is associated with brain damage. So if we've got 1 in 5 children being born with brain damaging levels of mercury, don't you think we ought to do something about that? We did a study in Ecuador of gold miners who were all mercury poisoned. That's what they use to take the gold out of the dust. They get gold dust, they mix it with mercury, it dissolves the gold, and then they run it through a coffee filter, and that leaves the gold on one side and the mercury on the other. And so, but we know they were mercury poisoned because of what they did for a living. And that we gave them OSR in a clinical trial. It cost us several $1 million. And we got 36 people. We studied 650 and picked the worst of the worst. And 36 people, 24 of them got OSR in 2 different doses. One got 300, one got 100. And the people that got 300 got a lot better, a lot faster. And the people that got 100 got better. And the people that didn't get any better. And I bitched about that because I thought that was contrary to ethics. I said, you scoured the world looking for people mercury poisoned, and then you didn't give them OSR. Well, they went back and found 9 of them and gave it to them. But, you know, it's not a controlled study, so it was worthless information. But how awful to go find 650 people mercury poisoned and only give 24 of them the solution. And that's what exactly they found. It made the fatigue go away, statistically significant increase in strength. They had a strength test at the beginning, and they got physically stronger. How does that happen? We fix the mitochondria. Energy comes from mitochondria, and we were able to show in 2 weeks at 300 milligrams a day, we made them stronger. That's got to be interpreted as something good. And that we did a decrease in pain. The OSR, Boyd has the patent for pain because it makes the pain go away. Well, why is that? Well, pain is oxidative stress. So if you got a pain, you're in oxidative stress, duh. And so pain, oxidative stress, 7 out of 8 of the gold miners that were tremoring quit tremoring. Well, what's tremor? Mercury has taken the myelin sheath off of the nerve. And so the nerve is now not conducting steady signals. It's an intermittent signal. So you get a shaky hand. The way you're steady is both nerves fire and say steady. When one nerve is firing and the other isn't, you get a tilt or a limb, and it's, so you wobble. And that's called a tremor. 7 out of 8 with the tremors stopped. I'd call that pretty good.
I would
But
say so, yeah.
more research is needed. So 15 years now, Boyd, after Rupert Murdoch lied about, they said Boyd was trying to kill all the autistic children. He wasn't. He's trying to heal them. So 15 years later, we're stuck in regulatory limbo. And so much.
So, David, can we maybe discuss briefly, okay, about testing, right? There's so much being said about testing. Excuse me. Mainly, for example, oh, I had this test done, this and such test done. It's showing so much and so much lead and mercury and whatnot and whatnot. And people who have tried the molecule also complain about the fact that it's still showing the mercury in the body. What's happening? What happens if the body is not excreting? I mean, there's so much about, I think, misunderstanding and misconception regarding testing, number one, that needs to be clarified.
Happy to, William. Let me start with testing. Is it, especially in the case of mercury, that in Iraq in the 60s, there was a famine where the people were they had a crop failure and they were starving to death. And the good-hearted United States of America sent over boatloads of wheat. I'm from Kansas. We have lots of wheat. And so we sent wheat to the famished area of Iraq. And unfortunately, it had been treated with methyl mercury. That wheat, if you put stuff in a silo or something like that, it'll get moldy. And then that ruins the crop, the next crop. So it was wheat that was intended to be planted, not eaten. And that if you send starving people gunny sacks full of wheat, they're going to grind it up and eat it. And so that's what they did, is they turned them into that chapati, the big bread loaf that is common in the Middle East. And they got sick, obviously, because they're eating methyl mercury. And then they finally figured out what had happened, and they basically isolated these people. They figured out who it was, and they had 170, I forgot the number, but it was a big number of people. And they interviewed them and said, how many loaves of bread did you eat? And, they got a number. And they measured their urinary mercury and their blood mercury. And everybody that was high in mercury, they treated. And everybody that was low in mercury, they didn't treat. The people that died were the ones that were low in mercury.
Of course.
That's because it's backwards. This is called the reverse effect. And everybody has seen the reverse effect for 100 years, and it just blows everybody's brain. And you can't wrap the human brain around the reverse effect, where less is worse. Because it wasn't less, it just wasn't in the fluids they were measuring. So if you're measuring urine, that means the body has already got a hold of it and is squirting it out. If you're measuring blood, that means the body's already got a hold of it and moved it into the bloodstream. And that if you're measuring hair, that means that's an excretion mechanism where the body's got a hold of the mercury and put it in the hair. So Boyd Haley saw that, and he said the reverse effect, that less is worse. So he did a study of autistic children with the New Zealand researchers, and it's called the baby's first haircut. And that one of the common things in the culture is to save the baby's first locks of hair. They grow it for a year, and at a year they cut it off, and so that hair is in the baby book. And so they managed to run down a large number of parent-child pairs. And so they measured the mother's hair mercury and the baby's hair mercury at 1 year, and that the amount of mercury in the mother's hair was exactly proportional to the amount of mercury in the baby's hair if it was a normal baby. So these are what we call excretors. But if the baby had autism, it was infinitesimal amounts of mercury in its hair, regardless of what's in the mother's hair. It's a non-excretor. It can't get it out. So when you go to measure stuff, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's a good thing if you've got a lot of mercury going out because what we know about that is it used to be in. Does OSR take it out? Nope. It makes it non-toxic. And this is another concept that makes people confused. And I like to give the example of marshmallows. Everybody in this podcast has, at one time or another, roasted a marshmallow over a nice campfire. And that, you turn it around and you try to keep it from falling off the stick. And, you get your nice marshmallow. And if Boyd Haley came along with his OSR and quenched your fire, you basically take a 5-gallon bucket and dump it on the fire with water. What's that do? That quenches the fire. That's all OSR does. It quenches the fire. It puts the electrons back on the mercury so it's no longer looking for you. It stops it cold. Did the mercury go away? Nope. It's right there where you left it. Why is it still
And
where
the
you left
question, and sorry, interrupt. And the question is, it still shows, if it should show in the test, it doesn't the test won't discriminate. This is mercury bound to OSR, and this is mercury unbound to OSR and bound to whatever else, isn't it?
No. Currently, we are spending tens of thousands of dollars to have an analytic laboratory to see if they can find a way to differentiate between the two. Because right now, the way scientists look at metals, whether it was like I was talking earlier about neutron activation analysis,
Yes.
or if you send stuff off to doctors' data and they take your hair or your urine or your blood or whatever and they blow it through a flame, it's called atomic spec or atomic spectroscopy, is that the frequency of mercury is 253.7 angstrom light, and that because it's hooked to another molecule does not change that. So bound mercury looks exactly like unbound mercury. And how do we know it was non-toxic? And this is Boyd Haley's argument with the Food and Drug Administration, who do not understand the very first thing about chelation. Chelation is not movement. Chelation is supplying the missing electrons. They don't get that because they're all traditionally trained doctors who think chelation is moving something to the kidney, which is in fact stupid. So Boyd says the Clark study, which was done before he ever sold one packet of material, ever took some himself, he first did the Clark study like a good scientist, and he found that no amount of the molecule would kill an animal. You could take a bucket full, stuff it down the animal's throat, and they look better. Okay, so this isn't a drug. It goes right on through if there's no heavy metals or oxidative stress to get a hold of. Doesn't cause any problem. So it's non-toxic, but how do you know it worked? So he took animals, and if you give it to an animal and then try to kill it with mercury, you can't. I'll say that again. If the animal has OSR in its system and you try to kill it with mercury, you can't find enough mercury in most laboratories to kill that animal unless you drop an anvil on its head.
And that was done with the rats as well, no? That was
And the rats were happy. They said, "Oh, good, I didn't die." But that didn't keep them from being analyzed, and so sacrificed humanely and analyzed. And even though they were given multiple lethal doses of mercury, and the mercury was still in every organ in that animal, the brain, the heart, the liver, the kidney, the tail, the paw, they were healthy. How could that be? Because the mercury had been quenched. It was no longer toxic. So Boyd did it another way. He said, okay, well, that's interesting, but let's do it another way. So he took and made a 1-to-1 ratio of mercury and OSR, equal amounts. And that so that there was no free mercury, no free OSR, just 1-to-1. Every molecule of mercury was hooked up to a molecule of OSR. And then he stuffed that down the little rats. And so he gave the rats enough to give a 2,000-fold lethal dose of mercury hooked to OSR. And guess what? It didn't cause any problem whatsoever. This is the Clark study. This was all done before it was ever a supplement. So the combined OSR mercury is totally non-toxic. And people get all funny about that because they don't understand quenching. Quenching is what OSR does, and that is true chelation, where you take the missing electrons that it's going to strip off your brain or your neuron or your myelin sheath or your membranes. It takes those missing electrons and supplies them. So now the mercury doesn't have any desire to do anything at all except hug that molecule. And that's what it'll do for all eternity until you put 1800 degrees in there. Or is it 1500? I forget.
Something like that. But
Google.
in any case, so
Google.
what is clear? I mean, it comes to mind that such a wonderful molecule. It's not only, let's say, good after discussing the part of oxidative stress, which is the main culprit of everything, everything that's going wrong in our health is oxidative stress. It's clear. So it doesn't matter if you have heavy metals or not. OSR is also going to do you good because it's going to take care of all the oxidative stress being produced by agrotoxics or your very stressful life that you're living. All the excess smoking, drinking, and whatnot. Okay, so mainly OSR as a molecule will take care of the oxidative stress, which will then allow the body to heal whatever or to get better in the proper way. And this is something people have a hard time to understand. They want to see the thing out. I want to see it out, and I want to be able to see it somewhere. And so David,
well, I can tell you how to do that. If you'd like to know, I can tell you, because it's a remarkably different molecule. Is it mercury dissolves into your brain, and so it can cross blood-brain barriers. It moves in your bloodstream. It's hanging on the molecules in the blood to move to the kidney. It's a very active molecule. OSR hooked to mercury is totally inactive. So all I got to do is take a biopsy of any organ in your body you like, brain, heart, liver, kidney, whatever you like, and then we can take it and digest it in acid of some sort, like, maybe you ate a steak and you put it in hydrochloric acid. Well, that'll dissolve all the protein away, right? And so you take that and you homogenize it, put it in a blender and screw it around until it's all done. And then you can take all your solvents and dissolve away all the other molecules. You can take your water and wash it many times because this molecule isn't going to dissolve in water. It's not going to dissolve in oil. It's not going to dissolve in any solvent. So when you get done washing that thing with all these different materials, what are you going to have left? You're going to have left OSR hooked to mercury. And that's the result. Does it stay in your body for the rest of your life? No, it leaves slowly, about the same speed as mercury not hooked to you, but it's non-toxic in the meantime. So they may want to see it move, William, but they're not going to get to because
and they should trust that it's being moved in any case.
Well, if the rats had died, that would make it difficult to trust, but the rats didn't die. So what does that tell you? That tells you it quenched the toxicity. They're not alone. The Food and Drug Administration doesn't like that either. They said, "Oh no, you need to treat some disease." So we said, "What disease do you think mercury causes?" They said, "We don't know."
Well, all of them.
Oh, great! So you want us to discover a disease and then treat it? Oh, that's good. That's exactly what you should have. Good-hearted people that are trying to make disease go away is we're supposed to discover a new disease, huh? Okay, good.
Okay, David, I think we could start looking at some of the questions in the.
I've looked at a couple of them, and the first one is that migraines versus headache, and their headaches. When I get a headache, I drink a large glass of water because most headaches are dehydration. Migraine is something else, and I'm not a doctor. I don't know what's causing migraines. but I'm sure that oxidative stress is not good for migraines. So that's a solid I don't know. And so that's number one. Then the next question is, can I take alpha lipoic acid if I have mercury fillings? Alpha lipoic acid falls into the category of a mover, not a binder. And so because it goes into the blood-brain barrier, there is speculation, and I have never seen any studies of this, but speculation is you don't really want to move things into the blood-brain barrier. You'd rather have them move out, but it doesn't necessarily move it out. It necessarily moves it. So I'd rather take OSR. OSR will bind it, doesn't move it, but it stops it. And so that stops it from doing anything. It's a bucket of water on your campfire. No more marshmallows. And that the person that commenting is also concerned about having the mercury fillings removed, and they have every right to be. The mercury filling removal is a very dangerous operation, especially if you've already got the symptoms of mercury intoxication, and that they may be brain, like a headache, or it may be tremors. It could be weakness, could be stiffness, can be eyesight. Those are all symptoms of mercury intoxication. So they don't stop they didn't start the day you got your mercury fillings, and they won't stop the day you get them out either. And I had to explain that to everybody. You can't smoke for 30 years and stop and expect the lung cancer to go away tomorrow. It's not going to happen. But
Exactly.
your lungs can heal, brains can heal. There are good things that'll happen. So what you want to do is to quench that mercury as soon as you can. And if you've got mercury fillings in your teeth, I tell everybody to find a dentist that is concerned about mercury, and that the organizations that these are IAOMT and IABDM. Those are American organizations, but they are both. I stands for international, and that means that we put on seminars in Istanbul, we put on seminars in Rio de Janeiro, we put on seminars in Dusseldorf, Germany, Offenhausen, Germany, London at the Oxford. So there are dentists, and they don't make much noise about it, because if they do, they get attacked by the dentists that are putting mercury filling in. So this is the same stuff as the vaccine thing, that if you say, oh, I think a vaccine caused this problem, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer, you're a conspiracy theorist, blah, 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 blah. When, they acknowledged in 88, I think it was, that vaccines are inherently dangerous. I mean, okay, you're putting a stick in the immune system. What do you think? So be sure to take OSR at least 4 hours. Why 4 hours? Because if you take it now on an empty stomach, in 2 hours, you get a peak in your blood. If you've had breakfast or a Thanksgiving dinner, it takes 4 hours to peak. So the only difference in the food is it slows its absorption. So, okay. So 4 hours before you get your fillings removed, take a big bolus dose of OSR. Take another one right as you get them out, and then you could have an idiot remove your fillings. Actually, most dentists themselves are impaired, I'm sorry to say, because every dental school in the world exposes the students to levels of mercury that are unlawful. And they lie to them about it, says this is the safe kind of mercury. We went to Brazil. Public health department was interviewing experts in mercury, and I was invited along with Boyd Haley and others. They wanted to, what is this story about mercury fillings? How come that is an argument that has been going on for 200 years? So let's have the experts talk about it, okay? And so we had the experts, and we insisted that if we're going to talk about it, we want the dental experts to come too. We want the people that are teaching the students in the school the truth about chemistry, biochemistry, neurotoxicology to come and talk. And the professor of dental materials showed up, and he didn't know where he'd arrived. He thought he was talking to a bunch of dummies, because he got there and said, well, we teach the students that they use the safe kind of mercury. And everybody about fell out of their chair, because there's no safe kind of mercury. It's kind of like a safe rattlesnake. No such thing as a safe rattlesnake. So they lie to him. And because it appears to be benign, there was a picture in the National Geographic, 1977, where the miner in Isidra, Spain, this mining mercury, had dipped his hand into a 50-gallon barrel of mercury, and it's just dripping with mercury. He didn't die. Not the sharpest knife in the drawer either. He probably ends up with some horrible disease later in life, but you can dip your hand in that, unlike Karen Wetterhahn, which got 2 drops on a finger. So there are different toxicologies of mercury, and the difference is absorption. It's nothing to do with anything except how fast that molecule gets in your body. Because if it gets in fast, it's going to kill you. If it gets in slow, it's going to slowly kill you. It doesn't make any difference. The molecule itself is the poison. And the absorption is what changes that. So be very careful when you get your fillings removed. Find somebody that will protect your nose. You can put a hose on your nose so you're breathing outside air. You can run oxygen through that, or you can run airway through that. But your nose needs to be protected. And if you got a fuzzy face like I do with whiskers, shave, because it needs to fit tight. You don't want to breathe around the edges. And so nose hose, they call it a cofferdam or a rubber dam over the tooth, vacuums all around, water spray all around, and then you remove it like hazardous waste. That you very carefully cut it into 2 pieces, take it out and put it in a hazardous waste container. Wash the mouth, wash the face, cover. You should be covered with plastic. Some people would say, oh, I couldn't stand it. Okay, well, go ahead and die. You can stand it. And if you can fly to the moon with 4 other people in a Volkswagen, you can take it if they can. Just channel your inner astronaut. And so be nervous about getting your fillings out, but be very careful. The next question was autistic children suffering from aluminum toxicity. Yeah, there's aluminum toxicity too. And no, the molecule does not like aluminum. But there are therapies for aluminum. Silica is one of them. So you can drink Fuji water, which is high silica water. What's interesting is the reason the aluminum is a problem is because of mercury. Now, that's my opinion, but mercury screws with your immune system. Aluminum is a light metal. It's not typically considered a very toxic metal, but how come it ends up high levels and toxic is that the drain is plugged. Mercury screws with the drain. So by having any amount of mercury in your body, it creates oxidative stress and plugs up the drain. So lots of times when you give people OSR, all manner of stuff starts coming out. They say, oh, I took OSR and I had more. Good. Your drain was plugged. If the plumber came and he snaked your toilet and it makes a gurgling sound, are you going to be concerned about that? That's silly. You'd be happy about that. It's going down the drain. So unplug the drain. So aluminum, silica, I think, is the current recommendation for that. I would add iodine, because iodine is a universal antidote to everything, iodine. And if you have, everybody's got fluoride poisoning, in case you didn't know, but from using toothpaste. And
the water system.
And water fluoridation, yes. Let's put the toothpaste in the water. What do you think? And so anyway, the antidote to fluoride poisoning is A, stop drinking it or swallowing it or putting it in your mouth, and B, get plenty of iodine. That the fluoride is stuck on receptors that it doesn't quite fit. Iodine fits perfectly. So it can actually do the same thing that OSR does.
As the OSR does with the, excellent.
Replace the fluoride, and your body, if it takes a pass through the kidney, your body gets rid of half of the fluoride.
In what amounts are we talking about when you talk about iodine? Like,
You know, I base this on the Gerson anti-cancer therapy. Dr. Gerson was here in San Diego from 1957 until he was murdered with arsenic several years later. But he treated he wrote a book called 100 Incurables Cured. And he started off giving them 12 milligrams, not micrograms. So the amount of iodine in salt is 120 micrograms. Microgram is a thousandth of a milligram.
Yeah.
It basically one infinitesimal amount of iodine made fewer children get goiter. The children used to get goiter, and if they get it, which is a big blown out thyroid because it's not enough iodine, and if you give them 130 micrograms of iodine, only 1 out of 5 children developed goiter. Well, I don't think 1 out of 5 kids developing a thyroid disease is the optimum dose. And so, can you take too much iodine? Not likely. There is a thyroid disease called Hashimoto's and so forth, in which iodine appears to treat, but it'll give you some Herxheimer's in the way. But anyway, iodine, antidote to fluoride. So antidote, everything is poisonous, not just some. Does OSR bind with aluminum at all? No. It opens up the pathway for your body to deal with it. How long do you recommend autistic children be on OSR, and what doses are you recommending to decrease the oxidative stress in them? Well, 1 dose will start. The optimum dose of OSR is 4 milligrams per kilogram. I'm saying optimum because that's the optimum absorbed dose. You can take 10 or 100 or 1,000 milligrams per kilogram. It just goes on through. It doesn't stop off to get a medal. But if you take about 4 milligrams per kilogram, that's the highest absorption rate. 5 milligrams, you get a little bit more. 6, 7, you're wasting it. So what if you want to do really aggressive removal of mercury? Do it twice a day, morning and night. You don't have to do it all in one
Yes,
shot.
because sorry, David, because we've been seeing that with the higher the dose, the better the results we are having actually. So we have children, for example, taking 600 milligrams per day,
Well,
and they are having good results.
break it into 2 visits. This is what I know is if you just all of a sudden gobble up 600 milligrams, 300 is going to get absorbed, and 100 a little bit, and then 200 out the poop chute. So from our human studies, the maximum absorbed dose is 4 milligrams per kilogram, and that kids, they're not that big. What if you're a 44-pound kid? Well, that's 10. That's 20 kilos. And so 4 milligrams per kilogram brings you up to 80 milligrams. So if you take 600, well, that's nice, but you're wasting it. So if you want to, so you got a 20-kilo kid, give them 80, 3 times a day. It's easy to figure out. You just say, if you want more, little amounts taken regularly will actually give you higher serum levels. It's called PK. The plasma kinetics are basically controlled by the absorption rate from the intestine. And so if you just take a big bolus dose, we've done safety studies at 600 milligrams for 60 days, and there has never, ever been a serious adverse reaction to the compound. Lots of reactions. You start pulling that knife out of your back, you can feel that. And so no reaction that caused hospitalization or even caused the experimental study to stop. It was just a reaction. We had I think a spider bite was in one of the reactions. But anyway, in a scientific study, everything that happens to the experimental subject gets recorded, and so. But when Boyd sold it as a supplement, he did the same thing. He sold it through doctors' offices and had them fill out adverse reaction for everybody. It's 2.5 million doses, only through doctors, not over the counter, not through the internet, through the doctor's offices. No serious adverse events. So it doesn't do anything to you. There is a sulfur sensitivity. It actually will fix that, but it takes it a while. So autistic children, I think we covered that.
Can you hear me, please? What if the child takes 300 in the morning and 300 in the evening? Will it still be a waste?
How much does he weigh?
He's, for example, 20 kilos. 300 in the morning, 300 in the evening. I did this for 3 weeks, and I saw I saw my child speaking, like having more words and 2 sentences.
You know,
But when I did per kilo of gram, as you say, I didn't see any change in my son, for example.
You know more about this than I do. We can't even do that study. They won't let us. They're mercury poisoned children in Colombia. They won't.
Will it be a waste if you do 300 in the morning and 300 in the evening?
Not if it's making him talk.
So David,
I think that's way of seeing it.
Ask the mother. One of the very, very famous physicians in Lawrence, Kansas, my hometown, good friend of my grandfather's. They were both old guys that he born in the previous century, in previous century, 1800s. My granddad was born in 1875, and his good buddy was real well known as a very good child doctor, because granddad asked him one time. He says, "How did you get to be so well known as a physician that could treat a child?" And he said, "Well, I won't see the child without the mother, and then I listen to her because she knows what's wrong with the child. You know what's wrong with your child. We're listening."
David. So David and Jasmine, thank you very much for your question. This is exactly something that people also need to understand. That first of all, the limitations of the scope and the width of the studies that can be carried out. You are already spending so much money in the clinical trials that you have done, and we wish it could be extended to kids and autism and whatnot. What we are seeing, indeed, David, is not only Jasmine, but many mothers that claim that their kids have a very accelerated improving their behavior, not only behavior, but the speech capacity and whatnot, if the amounts are bigger. As a matter of fact, Tabitha dug out some document by Boyd Haley somewhere, we must have it somewhere, where he speaks he says with between 5 milligrams to 10 milligrams is still okay. It seems like it works for some people, like really, So.
No amount's dangerous. There's no amount that is going to cause any harm. So,
But people obviously they are worried about wasting it. Obviously, nobody wants to waste it.
Yes. And I really think that the oxidative stress nowadays is even worse, especially with the children. So I really think the higher doses make sense when you have so much oxidative stress right now, like for everything. The EMFs, right? They cause oxidative stress. And we didn't have that 20 years ago, that amount of EMS, for example. So things are changing. So that's why I've been seeing those results nowadays.
Yeah. Well, not being
results, sorry to interrupt, but could the results also vary based on the toxic load each child could possibly have? Because the measurement of trying to measure how much toxic load they actually carry is something that is not reliable. So could the result be mainly based upon not the dosage necessarily, but the fact that it wasn't a lower amount, enough for the child, excess was excreted, but the child had a lower toxic load, and that's why they improved better? Or than other children or faster than other children.
Doing these studies, we've spent $17 million trying to prove that a supplement is effective in treating some disease, and we're out of money. We're not going to do any more studies. It's time for the government to quit stopping it rather than asking people to take their life savings and spend it on what Boyd calls stupid stuff. How many rats do you have to kill? We can't even treat children we know are mercury poisoned. That's Colombia. They wouldn't give it to the kids. No, they're not. They're children. Well, it's never caused any. That's why that Rupert Murdoch wrote the article about Boyd Haley. It's because the children recovered. Well, the people causing the children to be injured are the ones that are causing Boyd Haley bad names. They're the ones blocking it. So the evil continues to this day. The question is, how does hydrogen inhalation compare to OSR? And I don't know. Theoretically, that the molecule that's missing from oxidative stress is a hydrogen molecule, but where that's occurring is down inside the mitochondria. So how does hydrogen got a charge on get inside the mitochondria? So yes, theoretically, it would quench the oxidative stress. Getting it to where the fire is that's the fireman's hose, and if it's too short, it's not going to get there. So our dental personnel being harmed by the mercury, even if they don't have amalgam fillings, and that is absolutely correct. The highest levels of injury occur in the staff and the hygienist, and that's because they're the closest to the mixing. Everyone that works in a dental office should have some OSR. Can OSR be used the same time as stem cell treatment? You should do it before the stem cell treatment. The stem cells die because of your toxicity. So clean yourself up with OSR, and then yes, it can be used with it. What dose is needed in order to remove oxidative stress and mercury? And you got to measure that. It depends. We took healthy rats and gave them OSR, and that 60% of it was used up in treating oxidative stress. These are healthy rats. Not everybody that's sick is high in oxidative stress. These are healthy rats. 60% of it got immediately used up treating oxidative stress. So I guess take some and see how it works. How do you push OSR bound mercury into the bile? You don't push. Don't worry about it. It's stupid. You don't want to touch it. It's going to get there through what's called the P450 system. Your body knows it's there. It's not magic. It's lying there totally inert. Enzyme comes along called a CYP enzyme, CYP, and there's several different versions of it. And what they'll do is they'll put a hook on that ring. That if you think about this molecule, it's a stop sign, 6 carbons, all populated around a stop sign, and on the top left and top right are 2 long arms. Well, that leaves 4 other carbons that you can do something with. And so the body comes along and puts a hook on one of those carbons, and that's how the glutathione level pulls that molecule into the poop chute. So it's called the P450 system. It's a long, slow process. You're not going to accelerate it, but the good news is that the disease has stopped. Mercury quit. Once you dump that bucket of water on the fire, you're no longer cooking marshmallows. So that you can take all the time in the world to clean up the fire and move the ashes. But that's all you're doing. You're just moving ashes. It's not going to hurt you.
But this thing, this big worry, I think Rohania's commentary before was quite appropriate, but people need also to understand the limitations of all these studies, because you are able to study a certain amount of issues regarding these people in the Colombian gold mines and whatnot. So does the amount of toxicity have something to do with the time and the amount needed of OSR? I guess the answer would be yes. I mean, it depends how, if you It's not the same if you have one amalgam, if you have two amalgams, or if you have. We have the case of a woman who had 14 amalgams and two of her kids. She has 3 kids. 2 of her kids have autism, right? So I guess the probability of being sick augments as more you have of this toxicity, what you are finding. But the probability of getting rid of it and healing also augments the amount of you're going to be using. So this is a difficult question. We get it very often.
William, but what you're saying is there's a dose of mercury based on the number of fillings, and that's true. But who gets sick is not linear like that. Is that you can get sick from one filling?
Yeah,
and that's the bizarre thing about mercury is that when
so
they
you may be predisposed. You were born genetically predisposed,
or you may have lead, because lead makes mercury 1,000 times more toxic. So you may have a little bit of lead and a little bit of mercury, and then you're really sick.
There you go, the interaction. And also the diet and where you live, also the air you breathe is not the same to live in the countryside as to live in the city of Sao Paulo, where you're breathing toxins all day long, mostly lead from the automobiles and the airports and whatnot. So, yeah.
Rohan asked another good question. Is there anything that should be taken away from OSR to not affect how it works in the body? And the only thing I tell people to do is that the rats only got OSR. And a lot of these people are trying to treat mercury intoxication with what are called binders.
Yes.
Binders are water-soluble, sulfur-containing products. Binders do not bind. Unlike their name, they do not form a semi-covalent bond. So what they do is that they basically are overdosing you with sulfur. And if you've already got an impaired sulfur metabolism, that can trigger a reaction. So I say, just take the OSR. You don't need other stuff with it. And so other stuff may or may not hurt, but they're not going to help because the rats only got OSR and all of them survived. A lethal, actually, they survived a 10-fold lethal dose of mercury. So obviously, a little bit of OSR is a lot better than none.
There is this person,
David, I have a
David,
question.
this person with ALS is asking again about should she use it while still having the feelings, the amalgam feelings. I think Boyd Haley has answered that question. You should.
Because it's like, should I take it if I'm eating a fish taco? If I'm going to have a fish taco, I take it before I go have a fish taco. It's stupid to wait till after you have the fish taco. So
because you're chewing and you're releasing, right? You're chewing, you're drinking hot drinks, you're releasing all the time. So yeah.
Well, that's my video, Smoking Teeth. So there's no question that if you got a mercury filling, you're getting exposed to mercury. So take the antidote. I mean, it's not going to hurt you. It'd be nice to get the filling out, but maybe you're too ill. Maybe you can't afford to. There's a question down here about IMT dentists in Mexico. We've trained dentists in every country in the world almost. So yes, I'll just consult with them and make sure that they follow. You can watch the IMT protocol on the IAOMT webpage. And here, some places it's typed in wrong. It's IAOMT. So you put in IAOMT and then spell the word SMART. IAOMT SMART, it'll take you to a video that explains what
to do
should be doing to protect you.
And there is also a directory somewhere in the net. There are some directories in every country where you can find
look up a dentist that's been trained by the country or by the telephone area code. And do they charge more? Yeah, they do. And so I got out of the business. I got poisoned and took out about as many fillings as I put in and quit. So
okay, that may be a lot of them.
David, thank you very much for the talk. It's been very interesting. I would like to ask you a question. How to titrate the dosage of OSR? Let's say, for instance, every time that I get 75 or more milligrams of OSR, I get serious headaches, would you say that I keep a lower dosage until I don't get that headache anymore?
That makes sense. I wonder, are you getting your OSR from William? Because there are fake OSRs that have solvents in them, and a solvent is will dissolve the blood-brain barrier. So, even the FDA commented on the amount of adverse effects of the knockoffs, and so there are making pure OSR is expensive and hard. So people say, "Oh, I want it cheap." Okay, fine. That you're going to get something cheap. So to make this molecule, it takes actually about 24 hours and a very detailed process where you make it and then you decontaminate it because there's going to be junk protein in it, there's going to be residue, there's solvents and all that stuff. And so that the decontamination process and particle size is extremely important in making good quality supplement. Is what Boyd made it as. He made it just GMP. Since they've accused him of having a drug, we've had to switch and make it GMLP for pharmaceuticals, and that made the price go from about $10 a gram to $100 a gram. So thank you very much. Your regulations serving the everybody but the
Yes.
So anyway,
but to help you, Mauro.
Mario, I've never heard anybody that couldn't take. We've done clinical trials and we start at 600. And so if 30 gives you a headache, then obviously there's something different about you than
75 milligrams gives me.
Yeah, but listen, this thing about the headache, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mauro, and we hear it a lot, okay? Some people get it in 1 degree or bigger headaches. I myself, when I have taken it, I get sometimes a little headache or a pulling sensation in like somebody's pulling your hair or something like that sensation. But for me, it is like it is working. It is drawing that toxicity from the brain somewhere. And if it's not something unbearable, if I were you, I wouldn't stop. If it's unbearable, like I cannot take it, of course. And then the other thing is, are you thiol sensitive? Are you maybe do you have problems with, for example, onions and garlic and I don't know, broccoli, wine, red wine?
Not that I know of, but the main symptom that I've been having since I was mercury toxic was a neurological symptom, which is insomnia. It was not mentioned, but I'm sure that it's a pretty common one. And I got that by redistribution by alpha lipoic acid doing the anti-culturals method.
You'll be
Yeah, Mauro, you're not the first one who have problems after taking alpha-lipoic acid. With the redistribution, it's really pretty bad. If you are part of our group, we would like to talk to you privately to try to understand your situation better and help you better, okay?
Please contact us, Mauro, and make sure, like David is saying, you should check the source, where you're getting it, because the only one, the original from Boyd, is being produced for both the clinical trials and the water purification sector. So, the others, we cannot vouch. We don't know what's in it.
Yeah, sure. My other question is, David, would you recommend to take any other supplement to help the detox process?
No. Iodine to help you with your fluoride exposure, but that's a completely different molecule. What I like people to do is use OSR, and then I have a whole armful of supplements I take because I think supplements are good for you, but that you're not actually going to improve the function of the OSR. You're going to, perhaps improve the function of your body.
Exactly. Exactly.
It doesn't have any desire to attach to, vitamin A or B or C.
And it doesn't deplete minerals. That's a big question all the time. But does it deplete the essential minerals? It does not.
You know what? It will bind free iron, but it doesn't bind the iron that's in your hemoglobin. It doesn't bind the iron that's inside the mitochondria. Well, why does it bind free iron? Well, because that's a devil that's out there running free, and that it will bind it up. But the stuff that's being used by the body, like hemoglobin or in the electron transport system, is being used, and so it's not a free radical. It's not out there being a wild and strange molecule. So it does not have any desire to hook up with OSR. So it's a kind of a beautiful solution. Is that your essential minerals? I would say, if you're supplementing with zinc, which it should bind, and you have it in the stomach together, yeah, it might bind that up. But just don't take them together. Take zinc in the morning and OSR at night, or whatever turns you on. So I don't recommend any supplements with OSR. Do you recommend be taken orally by children with autism? Absolutely. If they're suffering from leaky gut, leaky gut is because there is mercury stuck in the gut lining, and this will fix that. So no, that's not a problem, and it will actually help heal the problem. Do you have an opinion about less expensive dentists in Tijuana? Well, I don't know the prices they're charging, but there's several IAOMT dentists, and it's spelled wrong here. It's IAOMT instead of IAMOT. Anyway, the IAOMT dentists and IABDM is the other group in other countries, Mexico included. So yes, you can save some money by traveling. After the OSR,
David, just a small anecdote, very short one regarding Tabitha's dad had to actually take some OSR. We didn't have any access to any biological dentist. That was a couple of years ago, and there was some OSR still available by a friend of yours. We got I remember Tabitha got in touch with somebody and found this OSR, and he took the OSR, and he has ALS. Okay, let that be clear to everyone. He has ALS, and he had the amalgams taken out, and he was taking the OSR at the same time, and this saved his life. Okay, it saved him because he could have died. If any amount of mercury had gone into creating havoc in his body, he would have died. So, yes. The best would be obviously to find a biological dentist, okay? But we know they are not only available everywhere, but they are not cheap, okay? At least the least you should be doing is taking the OSR whilst they're having them removed.
Mike Vaughn asked, is after the OSR is quenched the OH minus, and does it start to diminish? How quickly does the OH minus reestablish itself? Well, not that fast, because one of the reasons the OH minus is there is because mercury has displaced iron inside the mitochondria. And that if you take enough OSR, not only do you get the mercury out of the mitochondria, you get the free iron out of the mitochondria, and your OH minus drops remarkably. And here's the only study that I know about that. It was back when it was a supplement. A physician in Florida had lots of autistic children in his practice, and he picked 10 grandmother autistic child pairs. Grandma was bringing the kid to the doctor for care, and so he said, well, let's treat them both. And that they measured their level of oxidative stress. The measure is called your reduced glutathione, and that measured the reduced glutathione, and then they gave them 300 milligrams. And this is just straight across. Little children and old women got the same dose, 300 milligrams. And that at the end of 30 days, there was a little bit of improvement in their glutathione, reduced glutathione, the kind that works. Just not significant, but just like you look at the graph and yeah, it's a hair up. And so he said, well, let's do it some more. And so they did it for 90 days. By the end of 90 days, they were all normal or better. So it took 90 days to get that oxidative stress quenched. So that's the only study I know of about how long it takes to quench oxidative stress. But 300 milligrams for 90 days seem to be doing a good job. Now, how much would you want to continue to do it with? I think you could probably do it with 100 milligrams, because once you get past that hump, and so if we had $100 million, we could take autistic children and grandmothers, recover their glutathione level, and then we could titrate down to see how low we can go and still keep them good. But no, that would cost $100 million. So we can't afford to do that. So we just have to wing it. Take some, see how it works. How many hours apart should each dose be? 4 hours. You know, you're gonna have a pretty clean, empty stomach and ready to absorb some more in about 4 hours. I'm still wanting to know, please, whether you can take OSR and whether you have amalgam. Sure, you can. It's no problem. It's not a problem. Better than having it run around and blow holes in your brain. Please help my son, weighs 54 and has been taking 200 milligrams for 5 months with no change. Since I give it twice a day and also increased dosage, yeah, you know, you're the mother. You can figure out what's going to work for him or not. And you know, like as one other lady said, that she found that her child did best at 600 milligrams. So you know, it's whatever it takes. What do you say? Can I use peptides? Sure. They don't care about peptides. Peptides are protein. And so if the peptides are causing a benefit, stick with it. Is insomnia a common symptom of mercury intoxication? Yes, it is. And does OSR seem to quench that? Yes, it does. In the gold miners in Ecuador, all the insomnia stopped in the 12 people that got 300 milligrams. Most of it stopped in the people that got 100 milligrams. And none of it stopped in the people that got none. So anyway, yeah, glutathione. Will glutathione stop producing if one stops OSR? No. What you're doing is you're recovering your normal glutathione, and that until you get more mercury in there to cause oxidative stress, it's not going to make any difference. Can I take
the production of glutathione will continue? Of course, it's going to be even better that when the cell is healed.
If you measure a baby, they have enormous glutathione level. They're wonderful, and teenagers too. They're up there. And as you get old, like me, that they keep going down, down, and down, and then you get old and you get an infection and die. Well, glutathione is your primary blockage for all the metals. So you want high levels of reduced glutathione, and that's what it causes if you take enough. Can I take supplements with OSR? Yes. Can you do OSR with the nose? Is it more effective? Nose makes me cough. I do have a big painter that snorted it, but then he assumed that he'd inhaled a lot of lead.
I have done it. I tried it because there was some talk in our group, and actually it felt a more immediate effect. It felt like some fog dissipating, but I don't think I would suggest everybody doing that. David, there is one question here privately somebody sent regarding the consumption of OSR and beer or wine or alcohol. Can that be done?
Sure, don't care. You can eat it with a turkey too. So what Boyd Haley does, and that there's some clinical evidence for this, is he just throws it under his tongue. He puts it in his mouth and lets it dissolve under his tongue. And the reason the circulation in the mouth is backwards, it goes up. It's the only place in the body where you'll get circulation up instead of down. And that if you put it under your tongue, it will circulate more likely to the brain. And you can swallow it too. But the gold miners had pills. They didn't have the option of putting powder under their tongue, so it worked if you swallow it too. Does it have a shelf life? Not that we know of. Boyd dug some out of his desk drawer that he made in 2007 and tested it. It was the same as it was the day he made it. So if you don't get it wet, it'll turn into a chunk, like a solid. If you don't get it wet and keep it out of the intense heat, it doesn't have to be refrigerated, but it should be in a dark drawer or something.
David, well, you've been very gracious and answered all the questions. I think we don't want to obviously abuse your time. Um, is there anyone who wants to ask a last question or have a last commentary?
Um, yes, I have questions if you give me some chance.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, I want to ask regarding my baby who is 2 years old, and we are thinking to start OSR with her creations. And she basically, I think my husband has amalgam filling, which I am like thinking like from him he passed to my baby. So for at the moment, like she's experiencing like blurry visions and poor muscle tones. So she's 2 years old, and her brain is growing slowly. It's not like the actual how it should be. So right now we are waiting for the practitioners as well, because we know that it has to be done under practitioners, which is very safest way. So in terms of our like the conditions, how we can gently start the voicer with her. If you kindly uh, give us advice on this, that'd be really helpful. And also my second question, like regarding my husband amalgam feeling, like if we would like to remove it, do you recommend to do the OSR in the same time?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there is lots of evidence that the male body burden of OSR can affect the semen. That they've done studies on dentists, and that the mercury poisoned sperm typically have bent tails. That you can actually see it under a microscope. Instead of having the normal flagella, they got a bend in it, so they're the ones that lose the race to the egg, hopefully. But yes, mercury affects both males and females. Males worse than females, but everybody. It's a general poison. It'll poison everybody. It is. Mercury is the most toxic substance known to mankind that's not radioactive. Plutonium beats it out, but people don't get how toxic it is because it looks like it's benign. It's liquid. Oh, and I put it in my teeth. So anyway, anytime you have anything done to your teeth, take some OSR ahead of time.
Right.
Including cleaning. And tell them not to polish the filling.
Somebody asked here about the progress in the pilot study on OSR and COPD.
COPD was unsuccessful. The doctors remarked that people got out of bed and started walking around. It was 2 weeks at 300 milligrams, and that's not enough. And that we never got a grant to do any more. But if you go to Boyd Haley's ranch and talk to the neighbor lady who came over in 2007, I think it was, or 6, hardly able to breathe. She was dying of COPD. And Boyd says, well, I put together this antioxidant. It might help your lungs. And so 25 years later, instead of being dead, she still walks over and begs a little OSR off of Boyd. So, and he's probably not doing that anymore. Poor Boyd had a stroke. So that's what happens when the government puts its foot on your neck for 15 years. It's not good for old people to be abused any more than it is for the children. So remember, stop Casapia, and that there's a Substack post on it. And Tabitha, if you would send out that Substack post to your listeners, then
Yeah, of course, I will do that. It's a crime against humanity what they do.
It is a crime, and that it's time that we're the policemen, because the policemen are supposed to be protecting those kids, are not. So it's time for us to stand up and say, I don't think that's right. You guys need to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, for those of you, so I think,
Oh, okay. We have a last question here with
yeah,
from
okay, go ahead.
Luis Fernando. Can you talk about the dangers of undercut circulation protocol? I think it's worth to talk about it, David, because some people are trying to do that and it's causing more harm than benefits.
Yes.
Well, the Cutler protocol is primarily movers. And I think I started my conversation with the fact that you don't want to move the mercury, because when you move it, especially if you're using a water soluble agent, you're moving it to the kidney. And that in the Casapia study, they showed that 100% of the children who got mercury fillings had evidence of damage to their kidney. So taking mercury and moving it to the kidney is probably not a good idea. So I don't think that I would recommend the Cutler protocol. If you do that, then start off with OSR and get all the mercury out of you, and then you can probably do the other things with no problem. But as long as you're moving mercury, don't move mercury. It's kind of like bomb disposal. You don't think of the little moron that showed up. He got a new job as a bomb disposal guy, and he showed up with a hammer. So he's supposed to hit the end of it, right? That's my thought of that protocol.
Right. Yeah. It seems like that is the main problem. It seems to be displacing the mercury and putting it where you don't want it. Well, David, thank you very much. Thank you very, very, very much for this interview. It's been wonderful. Really, lots of questions been answered. And yeah, we are, we are all hoping that some country is going to arrive to the people, taking the
150 countries in the world can approve it anytime they feel like it. So it tells you something about their reluctance to approve something totally safe. You cannot kill a human being or an animal by giving them too much OSR. So, the problem with regulation is when you approve things as safe, that's a good thing. When they add it effective, that means you have to treat a disease. So what disease does mercury cause? Every disease. Well, there's not enough money in the world to treat everybody for every disease. So we ain't never going to do that study. So no, we can show that it makes the mercury coming out in your urine, and it gives you better strength, gives you better sleep. That's not a disease, is it? I slept good. Well, that's not a disease. So anyway.
Yeah. And, just to finish, I would like to also invite some of the parents and some of the people who are interested. We are very soon opening it's going to be a different group, a group where we're going to be discussing more in depth some things. And there is a questionnaire that has been circulating that helps us to acquire lots of data, like the one we are finding out with the autistic kids that are coming back to talk. They are they're becoming more social and so on. And so a lot of this information will be in this questionnaire. And so please, if you are interested, contact us privately. We are more than happy to have you there. Thank you again, David. Thank you very much.
And Jasmine is telling David to kiss Boyd Haley for her.
Jasmine is one that said the
old guy probably not going to be. I'll give him a hug, okay?
You give him a hug. Listen, David. A funny anecdote is that Jasmine, when she heard her child for the first time saying "mommy" after just 4 or 5 days of taking the OSR, which was an amazing story, still gives me the goosebumps. She says, "William, talk to Boyd, tell him that I will become his ever slave to do his laundry, to wash, to cook for him."
He needs a slave. But
she was so happy, and of course we are also happy with all these stories.
She's not alone. That's why they blocked it. That if you all of a sudden you have a magic wand and you take away heavy metals, and the kid gets better, it was the heavy metal causing the problem, right? Well, where does the baby get a heavy metal? Either it gets it from mother, her fillings,
Exactly.
or it gets it from the doctor, his shot. So, well, we got to stop that. It's going to be bad for
But
business.
from the food as well. There's so many food with lead and mercury and arsenic, especially. You know, baby food is the worst.
Baby food and dog food. Dog food
And
is
dog.
Horrible, yeah.
So I give my dog some OSR. I saved a dog from congestive heart failure.
Oh,
The congestive heart failure is mercury. It's IDCM. There's 22,000 times more mercury in an IDCM heart, idiopathic dilated cardiomyopathy, IDCM, than there is in a heart that died of a heart attack. It's not good to have a heart attack. So 22,000, if I took your heart and injected that much mercury, it would quit. So they say, oh, we don't know what's causing that. So I'm gonna let you go. It's a strange world we live in, but
yes.
I think we and Tabitha are going to fix it.
Yeah, we hope so. We're
Hope
trying.
so.
Thank you, David. Thank you again. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone, for being
David.
here with us today. And yeah, looking forward for
Yes,
next.
I missed you.
We have missed you, David. We missed you.
I'll be back as often as I can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
David.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.